You are listening to the Lawyer Stories podcast with host Benny Gold. Lawyer Stories was founded in July 2017 on Instagram and is an expanding global network of lawyers and law students sharing their personal journeys to the noble profession of the practice of law. Join us on this podcast as we dig deeper into these stories and hear from lawyers and law students from around the world in all areas of the legal profession. Here at Lawyer Stories, we believe that every lawyer has a story. What's yours?
Welcome to the Lawyer Stories podcast with Benny Gold. Today we welcome in our friend, Neal Goldstein, founding partner at Goldstein Bashner in Long Island, focusing on personal injury. Neal is a mentor to millennial lawyers and the best-selling author of Who's in the Waiting Room, a book that I had the pleasure of reading. Terrific read. Neal, how you doing? Great to see you.
Benny, it was took us a while to put this together, but I'm glad we're here, and I think it's going to be a good conversation.
It will, definitely, because there's a lot to talk about, and you have a tremendous story. First, we're going to have a word from our sponsors. We really appreciate Lex Reception, who's going to give less admin and more time for you. You can switch off your calls knowing that you're going to be covered by Lex Reception. From answering calls and messages in real time to appointment scheduling, your clients will receive the care and support they need with Lex. Their legal answering specialists are on hand 24/7, so you're going to never miss a future call or a future case with custom scripting and software that can seamlessly integrate with your current workflow. Lex will make sure every potential client gets fantastic services from the first call. Lawyer Stories listeners, we're going to give you $250 off your first month of service. So there's no better time to get started. Simply send a message to Lawyer Stories, hit me up, and I will get you that link to the exclusive offer. So thank you to our friends at Lex Reception. So Neal.
Yep.
Back to you, my friend.
Yeah.
So it's great to see you. We connected in person, which was tremendous. Thanks for dinner. We had a great conversation over dinner.
Yeah, it was great.
Central Massachusetts. It's always thrilling to meet someone who we've been connecting on social media. And I want to take it from the top because you do have a tremendous story where we want to start from growing up. So you're a New Yorker. Tell us where you're from and basically tell us a little background about your family life and that sort of thing.
Okay, well, I'll try to keep it abbreviated to some extent. So I grew up in the borough of Queens in an area called Rockaway Beach, which is the southeasternmost portion of Queens, borders on the Nassau County line. Rockaway Beach is a seaside community. I grew up in the 1960s and 1970s. My parents had an apartment right, I don't know, a block from the ocean, less than a block from the ocean. I didn't realize back then how wonderful that is and how rare it is that people get to live that way. But it was a generally, quite honestly, it was a middle income community. My mother had been stricken with multiple sclerosis when she was younger. So by the time that I came around, I was the third child, actually the child that she was told not to have. Things got really bad for her. So she was pretty much unable to walk from the time that I was about 5. And then ultimately she found herself in a wheelchair. And my father was a pretty abusive man, emotionally abusive. So he walked away, absconded from the house when I was 12, and it was just me and one of my brothers. My oldest brother was sent away to a school in Brooklyn.
So what was your relationship like with your brothers? I know you had 2 brothers. So what was that like?
Both of them were fairly older than me. So my oldest brother, Sheldon, was about 8 years older than me, maybe 9. And he went to a parochial school in Brooklyn. what they call a yeshiva. That's an Orthodox Jewish school. And my other brother, Carrie, who was 6 years older than me, 5 years older than me, sorry, he, by the time that I was experiencing real challenges, he was a teenager and he was able to kind of get out of the house and do his own thing and not really be in the middle of it all like I was.
Okay, and like you said, your dad wasn't very supportive of your mom who had MS, and in the book you mention a time when you were going to go get Chinese food, and your mom was even decided she wanted to go, and she was trying to get down the elevator, and she was just taking a long time, and your dad just took off. Like I don't want to tell the whole story for you, but like what was that
Although
experience?
it was probably one of those experiences that you never seem to forget. And oh, am I disconnected?
No, your video is.
Oh, sorry about
Okay, there
that.
you go. That's
Okay.
all right.
Sorry about that. Let me just fix that.
There you go.
Anyway, I apologize. So the point of that is, uh, as my mother was coming down, she was walking very slow. She was with a walker. My father lost his patience as he normally did, and said, "I'm leaving. I'm not waiting any longer." And as a little kid, what did you know better? I think my mother must have said, "Go ahead, go with your father." And I guess I went, and you don't realize at that moment how much that moment resonates and is embedded in your head forever. And the guilt
Right.
and the anguish that I had over the years for leaving my mother alone for that
Wow.
simple uh just that simple ride to a Chinese restaurant, and then leaving her there, going back upstairs by herself. uh it's something that just never leaves you. So those moments sometimes are key in how you develop later on and how you react to people. And sometimes, unfortunately, you might react the same way as my father did, but sometimes you do a complete 180 and you're a completely different person. And fortunately for me, it was the part where you act completely different. Oh,
Right.
what is going on here?
Oh,
I'm sorry. Okay. Yep. All right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
okay. Do we have the video?
1 second. Sorry about that.
That's
So that
okay.
should work. Hmm, I don't know why it's doing that. Okay.
All right,
Okay.
there he is.
That's not going to happen again.
That's all right, no problem. So, you did use the words. You really, it was very descriptive in the book. His coldness was unimaginable then, and it left an indelible imprint on your psyche to this day. I believe that one act changed me forever. And like
Yeah.
you say, it could take you one way or the other. Like this is how I'm supposed to treat people, or
Right.
the empathy comes out and you say, how can I do this to my poor mom, right? So that
Right.
obviously stuck with you for a long time. And
Yeah.
early in the book, you talk about how you weren't a bad kid, but you were a lost kid, right? So, can you tell us a little bit about that, and like maybe what would your advice be to somebody who feels sort of like lost?
That's true. And when I was young and I was challenged by not having the mother that what everybody else seemed to have, or everybody else seemed to have a functional mother, which for mostly was true. A father that absconded by the time I was 12, who knows what he was even doing before then. Uh, it puts a young kid, especially when my both brothers are not really available to me. And now you have a mother and father that are not really available to you. What are you left with? And yeah, maybe you have a few friends. I say friends loosely because what do you know about friends and what are you going to share with them? So you're internalizing all of this loneliness, and you're not really feeling as good as anybody. And so how did that for me uh, how did I internalize that? And did I become an angry kid? Probably. Did I do anything really bad? No, I don't think I was a sociopath. I didn't commit any violent acts. But clearly I had issues connecting with other human beings and not really wanting to be part of any group, not feeling that any group wanted any part of me. And that, of course, as my book goes into, what is why I ultimately dropped out of high school,
Right.
because I just didn't feel like anybody, quite frankly, gave a shit about me. So I said, okay, well, I'm out of here. And so that's when I dropped out, which was a different story.
But you dropped out, but you found an organization called BBYO.
Right. So,
So,
so, so,
but
yeah, so,
go
so
ahead.
what
Tell
I,
us about
yeah.
BBYO.
So what happened was, after I legitimately dropped out of high school and I presented my mother with the papers to sign, and who knows what kind of hell she was going through at the moment, but she did sign them. I spent probably the next few weeks to few months just walking around doing nothing,
Right.
just watching what the world does when everybody else is in school.
Yeah.
And so at one point, I walked into a building that I remembered that I went to in for kindergarten class. Walked in just because I had nothing else to do, and I was looking inside the atrium and trying to remember if I remember this place really well. And all of a sudden, I got a tap on the shoulder from behind me. I said, "Okay, somebody's about to throw me out, because why is this, 15-year-old, 16-year-old kid walking around here?" And young guy, cool looking dude, probably in his late 20s at the time. And he said to me, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I'm just walking around. I think I went to kindergarten here." And he says, "Aren't you supposed to be in school?" And I really had no, even though I was legitimately out of school, I had no
Yeah.
really nothing to say. And I said, "Well, I'm not a school type of guy." And he looked at me with this really nice smile and he said, "That's okay." And we just started talking, and that developed into the first real relationship, which I allowed myself to be involved in, and somebody who I thought, really cared about me and wanted to see me do well. And so he introduced me to this organization called BBYO, B'nai B'rith Youth Organization, which I ultimately got immersed myself in. That's the truth.
Right. And you met some good people there. You met some, like a nice young lady who was very supportive of you. And, people eventually wanted you to be the president. I think that that's something that really, that was kind of a turning point in the book, right? For like your confidence and like your, just becoming a leader and realizing sort of like self-worth and value and like, hey, I'm just as good as like anybody. I don't, maybe I think it kind of lends to like imposter syndrome a little bit, which, a lot of people
Sure.
have. But tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So after being involved for whatever it was, several months, the president was leaving, and he came up to me and he said, "Look, you brought a little bit of energy into this group," which I thought was weird because I didn't think I did, but I guess he did. Or maybe he was just saying that to get me to be president. He says, "We'd like you to be president." Now, there really wasn't anybody else running, so it's not like this was a competitive race, but you still had a job to do if you took that position. And I really, I didn't know what to do, because I said, I'm going to start leading a group of young people who are probably still in high school. And I dropped out of high school. It just didn't jive in my mind. And yes, I did feel like nobody's going to listen to me. Who's going to listen to me? But then I don't know, something inside of me said, do it, do it, do it. And I did it. And yes, it was an absolute turning point for me, because I got the opportunity, besides meeting so many people around the country, I got the opportunity to speak in front of people. I got the opportunity to grow in a way that there's absolutely no way I would be the person I am today had that moment, had that part of the journey not occurred.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what went on after that? You thought maybe you should get a GED, and then you went to, um, community college. How did that all transpire?
Well, I guess, you take one step forward, you see it's safe, you dip your toes in the water and you say, okay, I'm not getting bitten, I'm not getting cut up. Let's go a little bit further. And so that's what I did. And so with the assistance of that nice social worker who tapped me on the shoulder, he encouraged me to get my GED, which I did. Uh, and I went to community college because that was the only school that would accept somebody with a GED. I did really well. And I said, wow, I'm pretty good at this. Having dropped out in 10th grade, I really did not know how well I would do in academics, but I did really well. And it grew from there and went to a few colleges, ultimately graduated CUNY Queens College, and decided to go to law school.
Right. So, right, you went to a community college, and then you were CUNY Queen. I think you did a stint at Albany too for a semester,
Yes,
which was
yes, yes.
kind of cool. I applied to Albany back in the day, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I have a good friend who went there. But that's incredible. So you were probably like thinking, okay. I mean, I'm just wondering, like, were you thinking about the high school thing, like when you were back in college, or you just felt like you had grown so much since then?
Well, it's a little bit of both because to be honest with you, even when I was in community college, it was Nassau Community College, I said, I figured, let me try and start a group. Wasn't going to be
Right.
BBYO anymore, but I wanted to start a group with people that I had something in common with. And so at the time, my major was health education. So I started the first health education club at Nassau Community
And
College.
who'd you have
And
speak? Tell us.
Ruth Westheimer, if
There you
anybody
go.
knows that,
Yeah.
you're showing your age. But Ruth Westheimer was kind enough to come to my one of my speaking events, and that really turned the club into an extremely popular club. And
That's
so,
unbelievable.
and believe me, I again, the imposter syndrome hit me at the early part of creating that group. I said, who's going to want to come to this group? But sure enough, it was successful.
So that's amazing. And, as we get into like the law school years, I mean, law school is not regular school. It's freaking law school. You know what I mean? It's what, so like, when did you know you wanted to go to law school? Like, what decision, what pushed you? What was that? Did you have like a striking moment that was like, I'm going to be a lawyer?
I'm sorry to disappoint you, Ben, but it wasn't a striking moment. It might have even been a process of elimination. In other words, I originally went into school health education. I wanted to do something in health because my mother had multiple sclerosis. I felt I was well equipped in
Yep.
that area. And so I started out health education. Then when I went to 4-year school, I said, I'm going to do physical therapy. Didn't actually work out. I didn't think I would, after volunteering, I didn't think that would work out. So then I moved into hospital administration. I said, well, maybe that would work out. And then I found out I'd have to take the GMATs to get into graduate school. I said,
Right, right.
that's not for me. I'm not good at math. And so I went to law school, and I think, if I have to really dig deep, I think the reason law school attracted me was because of all the advocacy I did for my mother at a young age,
Mm.
going to all of these different social service agencies and sometimes administrative court proceedings when I was only, what, 16, 17, and I'd walk in, and whether it was 2 or 3 lines, whatever I did, I was I was actually acting as her advocate.
Yeah.
And I think that prompted me to say, you know what? Why can't I be a lawyer for people who've been placed in situations where they need some help? They need assistance. And so it turned out to be personal injury.
Right. And you only wanted to go to one law school, right? There was like one law school for you, or were they
Well,
all in New
well,
York? You
well,
were applying to all of them in New
well,
York.
Well, here's what happened. I was got an average LSAT score, and I did average. I had an average GPA. It was good, but it wasn't the best, and it certainly wasn't the lowest. But to get into New York's law school, it was very competitive. So I was prepared to go wherever I had to. So I'm not going to name the names, but I was applying to law schools around the country that I knew were going to be easier, and I
Right.
didn't want to necessarily go to those places because they were
Right.
not in the most desirable locations for a young person, but I was going to go because that's what I had decided on. And then I started getting accepted to every law school I applied in New York. And I believe, because I don't know for sure, but I believe a lot of it simply had to do with my personal statement, which started me on my one of the things that I I talk about a lot, even to this day, is sharing your story. So in my personal
Right.
statement, I shared my story in a meaningful and authentic way.
That's
And
right.
I believe I must have touched a number of people who gave me the opportunity to go to law school in New York.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And tell us a little bit about it because you were going part time, right? So,
Right.
you had a tremendous commute. You when were you going to study? You had like a 2 hour or hour and a half each way. So
It's
tell us about the law school experience, Neil.
Yeah, so it was New York Law School. It's a very good law school, well-known law school here in New York. It's downtown Manhattan. I was working for a law firm in downtown Manhattan, so I left work at 5 o'clock, and then I had classes start at whatever it was, 6 o'clock. So you didn't have much time, and you didn't get out until sometimes 9:30,
Yeah,
which means I had an hour and a half ride back home. She got home at 11. Who's really going to study at that point? I guess there was some kids that
yeah,
I say kids. At night, there weren't kids, they were adults. I was one of the few younger people there. And, my goal was to learn as much as I can, but I knew that I was probably not going to be an A student, and that was okay. But I met a lot of good people and I did well. I had a tough start because I wound up being put on probation because I somehow thought I would do as well in law school if I just did the same thing I did in college. And
yeah.
that didn't work.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that I think a bunch of kids go through that. So in the book, like, and I want to ask in like real life, like not real life. I guess the book is real life, but I
Right.
guess my question is, when did you discover that the only way to be successful in life is to have real, authentic relationships? And like, what do those relationships look like to you?
Well, I think, again, people always ask, if there was a moment, if there was a moment. And the truth is there was a lot of little moments. So, and I think the book, which is really a memoir that more than anything, really shares some of those moments, right? So it's a moment, when
Right.
realizing at some point that I actually needed other people because I had nobody. A lot of that happened in the book when somebody asked me when I went to the hospital, who's in your waiting room?
Right.
And there was nobody in the waiting room. And I actually thought this is really stupid. This is really ridiculous. I can't live like this. And then ultimately, when I embraced the social worker at the Jewish Community Center, and then when I ultimately became president of the B'nai B'rith Youth Organization, and ultimately when I started a club at Nassau Community College, and then when I went to law school. So it was embracing other people in a genuine and authentic way that helped me uh, evolve. Of course, I was the one that had to embrace these relationships. I was the one that still had to do the work.
Right.
But when you embrace other human beings in an authentic way, it comes back to you tenfold.
If you just be yourself. I mean, I know you talk about being yourself too, like in the book. Like, tell us the importance because we see people out there, with social media and everywhere, just trying to. Maybe that is them. I don't know. Maybe that is them. But what do you say to
This is
people?
this is a big subject because I talk a lot about uh, authenticity. And by the way, that was, I think, like the word of the year. Recently, I heard that authenticity is the
Hmm.
word of the year. The truth is, look, when I first was asked about B'nai B'rith, if I wanted to get involved in it, I didn't really want to get involved in it. It seemed like there was a lot of nerdy kids in there, and like I wasn't even going to tell the few friends that I had that I was getting involved. But then all of a sudden things changed. And
Yep.
I saw, wait a second, these guys are just as, I don't know, they had cool guys, they had nerdy guys, they had whatever, a bunch of different guys, jockey guys, but we all had something in common and we all got along pretty well. And I kind of found my place. And
Right.
so, it it's and I talk about that even today with younger lawyers. Don't look for the A-list philanthropies to get involved in. Not that they're bad, but if that's not your thing, man, don't do it because everybody's going to know you're just doing it just to get business. Same thing when I was younger. I didn't want to get involved in a school organization that, even though it was the cool organization to get involved in, I started my own group called the Health Awareness Society. And yet ultimately it became successful. People saw that I was really interested in it. So those people didn't look at me and say, oh, he's just trying to do A, B, and C. I had some ulterior motive in mind. I didn't. I really didn't. And to this day, any organization that I get involved in, it's because I really want to be involved in it, not because I'm looking for business. The worst mistake you can do in your life is to join a group looking for business. That's
Right.
bad. That's one of the things that
I
I
mean,
come
there are
to.
groups set up just to make you look for business,
Of
like
course,
networking groups. I mean, those aren't, I mean, those can't necessarily be that bad, right?
if you, I always say, to be honest with you, if you want to lose 200 cards, go to a networking event. Now, and because the traditional networking events often don't work. It doesn't mean that it's bad for everybody. It doesn't mean that some people might get something out of it. But if that's not your thing, you know how many people go to these events and before they go, they always say, oh, I don't really want to go. I'm just going because I can get a drink, I can get something to eat there. Then you're just wasting your time, man.
Yeah.
And so you have to find what you yourself are interested in. So if you're interested, in no matter how kooky or crazy it is, if you're interested in rock collecting or looking at clouds or looking at birds or you're interested in nudist retreats, well, go join those groups. Those are the people that will look at you and say, hey, this guy is authentic. He's really wants to be here. And ultimately, you will get business that way.
Okay. No, that's interesting. So, we I like to think, our little events that we've been having are people that have a lot of people have met online and then they're kind of coming together and some haven't. And, they're kind of fun. Like, how do we like kind of reconcile like people finding their tribe on like Instagram, like making friends on I mean, I've met some tremendous people who I finally, after 3, 4 years, got to meet in person. And it was like, it all started kind of in Atlanta and then we parlayed into like a few events. Like, how do we like put together like doing that versus in person? I mean, like people are really meeting online and they're connecting that way, but I guess there's nothing like being in person.
Well, that's the whole point, Benny. I mean, I'm not in any way suggesting that we should all throw out our laptops, computers, and do away with them. That's never going to happen. This is a part of our lives now, and for better or worse, and we know that there are great benefits to digital communication, especially when we look at COVID, how important it was. And so here's my thing. Digital is a great way to introduce us to people, right? We
Right.
met, we met digitally, but it's not, you're not going to you're only going to go so far
Yeah.
digitally.
Right.
The real connection is when you meet each other, when there's a face-to-face connection. And particularly as lawyers, at some point, no matter how great your website is, no matter how great you speak on a reel on Instagram, at some point, man, you have to meet the client. And if the
Yeah.
client doesn't like who you are because you got an ego the size of my house, ain't gonna happen, no matter how pretty your reel is. So,
Yeah.
digital gets you so far. And then, you want to meet in person. That's the great thing. And that's why I'm glad you started doing some of your events in person
Yeah.
because, that's
I
really
mean,
where it's at.
there's been nothing like them. I mean, they're a lot of fun. So I don't know. I hope everybody else is having a good time. I had a blast. So
Well,
anyway,
from the videos, it looked that way.
so Neal, tell me. I think you kind of touched on it earlier, but why the name "Who's in the Waiting Room"? I just want to make sure I have clarity on this for the book.
So, yeah, so when I was 16 going on 17, I got into an accident, cut my hand really bad. And we had no health insurance in my house. I had no money. And I had to go to a hospital and I had to ultimately get surgery. Uh, and I found a surgeon who was kind enough to let me pay out his bill. Can you imagine that? And
Mm,
he was dealing with me. He wasn't even dealing with a parent. Can you imagine
right,
this?
right.
And so I was in the hospital and it was overnight, something that today would have been done and you would have been out in 6 hours. And that morning when I got up, the nurse came in and she said, okay, we're going to go. Who's in the waiting room? And I remember saying to her, and I felt really foolish, feel like an idiot. I said, nobody. Who was going to come? My mother.
Right,
My mother was in a wheelchair.
right,
My
right.
brother. My brother was probably around with some girls in high school fooling around. I don't know what he was doing. Uh, nobody was there. That's the truth. And so on the way that I walked home, I was thinking, I really feel like I just felt so bad. And I said, well, I can't do this. I really, if you ask me about a turning point, that really may have been a
Okay.
moment of change where I said, I can't do this. Something's got to change, or else I'm going to live a really crazy life. And so and my, by the way, my publisher did not like the name of that book. He
Okay.
wanted a different name, but I said, you know what? This is the name that has meaning to me, and a lot of people seem to, it seems to resonate with them.
What was the alternative name? Do you remember?
It was something simple like, creating relationships through authenticity or something like that.
Okay.
Something very bland,
Gotcha.
and
Gotcha.
they liked it because they felt people would know what the book was as soon as they saw the title. Mine, they really don't know.
Right. Understood. You talk a lot about listening.
Mhm.
What do people, so in the book you say, uh, with your heart, you must have empathy, skills ready. Listening with your soul means listening so that your inner instinct, wisdom, and voice are aware of what is being talked about. Now, that sounds really deep compared to what I think a lot of people look at or think listening is. So, um, what do people misunderstand generally about the act and the art of listening?
Well, let's try to bring it down to lawyers. Lawyers love to get the story from the client quickly, what happened, the facts, and they
Mm,
want to move on. They want to hear what's relevant to the issues as to why they may be retained, and they move on. Often they lose patience because clients don't often stay in one line. They move around when they're talking. When I say stay around, they kind of go around in circles, verbally. Uh, when you talk to somebody, you have to when you're listening to a story, you can't walk in with the intent of talking. You have to go in with the intent of listening. Most lawyers don't do that. They go in with the intent of saying something, of talking. And the truth is, when somebody's listening, it's more than just the ears, right? You have to be able to look at the person eye to eye. You have to be able to look at their hand movements. You have to see their emotions. Are they tearing up? Are they their verbal uh, uh, the way they're telling their story? Are there some parts where they're higher pitched, lower pitched? Are there moments when they get more emotional than other moments? You have to look at do they where they are physically. Many times I have clients that come in, especially kids, they have their hands folded. They're not, they're physically not there even when they're speaking. And if you're
okay.
not looking at all of these things, you're not really getting what your client is saying. And if you can't repeat back in your own mind how the client is reiterating a story to you, then I'm not sure you're really listening anymore.
That's great advice. So you have to look at the totality of everything and maybe, read your client and, see
You
what
have to,
sort of
you
giving.
have to, and you have to give them, as I say, center stage. You're not center stage. Lawyers, because they're so ego driven, not all, but many are. In fact, most lawyers have some level of egotism or ego fetish. We all have it to some extent, but some lawyers are so overwhelmed with their ego. Not some, many are that gets in the way of their own success.
Hmm,
And so, a lawyer who has a modest ego will step back and say, I'm not taking center stage. Let the client take the center stage. Speak however long you want to. And I'm going to watch. I'm going to listen. I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to listen with my heart and hear where, the emotions are so that I know exactly where you're coming from.
that's great. I love that advice, Neil. Thank you. And I think so many people, and lawyers forget that how important that is, especially for
Yeah.
clients to feel heard. Uh,
Yeah.
so Neal, not trying to give away the whole book here. I think we've touched on a lot of it, but tell me, is this a little bit of like a love story too at the end?
Well, yeah, it is because let's be very clear. Our lives are it's not two separate lives. It's not a busy working life, a business life, and a personal life. A lot of lawyers and a lot of business people like to say that. Well, I leave my personal stuff at home and I leave my work stuff at work. Bullshit. Very few people have the discipline to do that. Most of us are human beings, and whatever goes on at home spills into work, and whatever goes on at work spills into home. And
Yep.
so, you write a book about business, the best books about business, the best biographies about business or whatever always involve the author's uh, personal life, and that's what makes it really good. Some of those books.
Yeah, sure.
So, uh, the book that the I forgot his name, the owner of Nike wrote. Now I forgot the name of the book, but his book was so intertwined with his personal life that it just made the book much more uh, palatable for all of us when we were able to see the personal life. So in my book, I shared personal stories, very personal stories, some that made me uncomfortable as I was writing it. But I knew that if I was going to be true, I had to. I had to write about those things. And one of those things had to do with my wife, Gina. We had met when we were in B'nai B'rith, when we were 15 or 16 years old. And she saw that I was on the wrong track. And she saw that I had dropped out of high school. And she was from the right side of the tracks. I was from the wrong side of the tracks, if you will. And I don't think her mother really cared for me, being involved, in her daughter's life. And her daughter probably felt like I could go one of two ways. And, she went on her own way academically and did well. And it was only when I was going through a divorce that, at some point we met up again. And it's funny, I texted her on a Facebook message years and years and years later. And I said, Gina, do you remember me, Neal Goldstein? And I think she quickly looked at the picture, and I used to have a full of afro, and I guess I don't have that. I didn't have that anymore.
Hey, if you
And
get the book, you see all the great pictures. They're tremendous,
yeah,
tremendous. Some of these photos.
and she said, of course I remember Neal Goldstein, and but let me check him out first. And so she started looking at some things on my profile and saw something about a bar association and lawyer, and she just starts getting emotional
Yeah,
and
and,
starts
and
crying.
right.
Yeah.
So I want to just stop because Neal, I've thought about this, and when this becomes a Lifetime or a Hallmark movie, this is the piece that's going to be so dramatic. When she looks at this, she's like, "Oh, Neal, which way did he go? Which path did he turn in
Right.
life?" And then
Right.
she sees, you own. Tell us the rest. You own the firm, and you've
Yeah.
done so
Yeah.
well for yourself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's definitely it was definitely a story that could be written, and maybe one day it will be. Uh,
Awesome. Yeah.
yeah, it was great, great. It's a great story.
Oh, I would love to see the movie. I think that would be a
Well,
really
I'll let you know. I'll let you
yeah
know. I'll
yeah.
keep you advised.
So I want to just show this chapter 7. By the way, this is a great photo, Neal, right here of you.
Oh, thank you,
But
thank you.
chapter 7, what does that say? Let's read that loud. Share your story.
Right.
So that's like a bit, that was a big connection, that we had. I think you saw what we were doing on Instagram, and like there was kind of a draw there. We went back and forth. So obviously, sharing your story is something that we both strongly believe in. I mean, tell me, you've explained a lot, but tell me a little bit about being vulnerable and sharing your story. And I think for me, I think it makes people who are willing to be a little vulnerable not necessarily walked over, because nobody wants an attorney who's going to be walked over, but it sort of people who share their stories and get a little vulnerable. It's more likable. I think like they're more believable. They're more likable. There's more of a connection. Um, so tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that.
It to me, sharing your story is the secret sauce to getting the clientele and having the success that you really want. And that's because from the time we're born, stories are the things that we love to listen to. So when you were in kindergarten, elementary school, you loved listening to stories. And as you got older, you loved listening to stories. You loved hearing about, the underdog. Let's think about the movie Rocky, right? You love the underdog story. You love the person that becomes the hero. But the truth is, stories don't always have to have that arc. It doesn't have to be, oh, I almost fell off the cliff, but I
Yeah,
saved myself. It
right,
doesn't
right.
have to be that dramatic. Sometimes it could just be sharing a bit of a story where you're, I don't know, something maybe where you're in the car with your brother and you were joking around and he accidentally did something. It could be something simple that other human beings can relate to, but that's what connects people. When people see that, that the stories you're telling are things that they can relate to in some manner, uh,
Right.
then that builds the trust. And a lot of people I know, and even some people that always will say, "Well, I don't really have a story."
Right.
Bullshit.
That's right.
Everybody has a story. So I know somebody, as an example, who grew up in a very wealthy family, and everything was right. Everything was right. And he said to me, "I don't have that story, Neil. I don't have your story." I said, "Well, I know you don't have mine, but you have your own, man." And so I started talking to him for a little while, and then an hour later, he says to me, "Yeah, my father always wanted me to do this, but I didn't really want to." So there is a
There's
story
a
there.
story. You
There's a
gotta
story
poke for it sometimes. You gotta prod
that
and poke a little,
that
but
that's right. And then when you know your story, you have to want to share it.
you
Some
have to
people
want
don't
it.
want to share it,
You have to be
and
ready to. You have to be ready to, and you have to want it. That's right.
and there are baby steps that you can take to get to that point. But once you do it, and it's done in a genuine, authentic way, I guarantee you that builds clients. Let me just share very quickly. I handle a lot of cases where kids have been significantly bullied to the point that they had suicidal ideation. And, I remember one kid coming into my office and he sat in my conference room and he had his hands folded and he wouldn't talk. And, he was horribly bullied. And I was talking to him and I was talking to his parents. Parents were veterans, very nice people. And at some point, I said, okay, this is a good moment for me to drop at least a piece of my story.
You see your
Uh,
story, right?
right. And that's what I did. I dropped a piece of my story. And as soon as he heard it, he unfolded his hands and he smiled. And not that he became a different person, but he opened up a little bit, both physically, because I was watching that. That's part of listening.
Right.
And he just, his voice changed. And the manner in what he was saying changed, and that's the power of being able to tell a story that some way that the other person is going to connect with. And when you do it in an authentic
Right.
way, not underhanded, not cunning, but in a genuine way, it is the secret sauce, both for creating genuine and authentic relationships. And ultimately, if somebody's trying to market themselves, there's no better way to market
Right.
yourself.
And sharing a piece of your story is a baby step. You talk about baby steps.
Right,
So sharing a piece like you did with that young boy who had been bullied, you share
right,
a piece of your story. Not you don't have to tell him the whole thing, but a piece of it,
right,
baby steps,
right,
and he was
right.
able to connect with that, and so that was the secret sauce. That
That's correct. That's correct.
so Neil, give us some advice for young lawyers. I mean, after all, I know we talked about your story. Your book is tremendous. Who's in the waiting room? I recommend it to everybody. I have an autographed copy. Actually, I'm pretty psyched about that. But tell us, you got this law firm. I want to touch on that too in a second. But give us some advice for young attorneys.
So, funny, today there was on Facebook in one of the forums that I'm in, somebody said, what do I do during the first 100 days? I think he meant the first 100 days of next year or the first 100 days of his solo practice. And, everybody was giving their own advice, nothing wrong with the advice that people were giving. But one guy said, you got to have a good program for case intake. And okay, that's good. I'm not knocking it. I'm not knocking it. But I what I said was there's no point in spending money on case intake systems if you don't have
Oh no,
clients.
Neil's starting fights on Facebook
So,
forums.
no, I said it in a very nice way. And I said, here's what I want you to do. Get a
Yep.
calendar and start making appointments with people, whether they're current clients or potential clients or colleagues or anybody in the business world that you think might be able to help you. And go out to lunch, go out to dinner. This is a very low costly thing because I wrote, you don't have to go for filet mignon unless that's your choice. You could go for pizza, you can go for ice cream, you can go for coffee. People love that. Food brings people together, man. And that's what you do. I meet my clients, I meet them at Starbucks.
Yeah.
Why? They don't need to come into my office. I don't need to impress them with fancy furniture and fancy oriental rugs. Forget about that. Meet them
Do
somewhere
you
where
have those
there's
things though, Neil?
what do I have? What things?
Fancy furnitures and Oriental rugs?
At one time I did, but then I
Okay.
learned my lesson. That's not really what clients are interested in.
Okay.
So now I have very modest, nice offices, but nothing over the top. And so that to me would be one of the most important things that you can do as a lawyer. uh, Restrain your ego. Restrain your ego.
Strain your
Don't
ego.
look at the
Right.
don't look at the other guy's website where he tells you how many verdicts and settlements they have. That's irrelevant. No client is signing a retainer agreement because he put that or she put that on their website. They're signing a retainer agreement because they like you, they trust you, and they respect you. That's who people want to do business with. So forget about all that other stuff. It's irrelevant. Do become the person that you want to be authentic, join groups that you are truly interested in. Those are the groups that ultimately will give you business.
That's awesome. I love that. So personal injury field, what type of attributes make the best personal injury lawyers?
Wow, you'd get a lot of different answers from a lot of different people. Uh, I would tell you it's not going to be a secret. I would tell you that the best personal injury lawyers are those that don't just talk the talk, but walk the walk. Those are, I look at personal injury lawyers, Ben, as the concierge of lawyers. What does that mean? Uh, you know, Clients, I don't look at clients as clients. I almost look at them as partners, right? So I look at a client as somebody who's come to me because I have a certain set of skills, right? And there's something that I want from them, right? I'd like to advocate for them, their case. I'm going to make money from that. Nothing wrong with that. No apologies needed for that, but you're both partners. Why don't lawyers look at their clients as partners as opposed to looking at them as a client? Why don't you look at them as relationship building? So, I think I'd like to see more lawyers treating clients as equals because even though they may not be academically as smart as you, they are investing in something. You are investing in something. Often we look at that as partnerships, and that's really what it is. So if I have 300 cases out there, I have 300 partners. That's the way I look at it. Now, of course, there has to be a level of mutual respect for each other. That's imperative. But nonetheless, if you're going to be a good personal injury lawyer, you've got to respect your client. You got to know your client, not just know the facts of the accident, which is essential. You have to know the case, that's important, but you have to know your client because the better you know your client, the better money you're going to get for them. Sounds crazy, but that's true because when you go into a mediation or a trial settlement or even a trial, when you know your client, you're going to be a different advocate. You're going to advocate as if it's somebody really personal to you. And that's key for a personal injury lawyer. You're not a contract lawyer. You're not a real estate lawyer. You're not a trusted estate lawyer. You're a personal injury lawyer. Remember the first part of that
Right.
personal.
I think that's terrific. I think you could probably speak for a half an hour on, personal injury, like what the meaning of, both those words together are. That's a great point. I love
And
that.
and let's take it out of lawyers for a minute, and I'll give you a personal story real quick. So I'm going to talk to you about Dr. Rayner. Dr. Rayner, Herbert Rayner. He was a dentist, and he was my dentist when I was young. He pulled my tooth when I was 13, and 25 years later, when I moved 2 hours away from him, when I was uh, in a different situation in my life. I could have gone to many other dentists at that point, but I went back to him. Why? Why did I keep on going back to Dr. Rayner? Why? Because when I walked inside, he made me feel, put his arm around me, and he made me feel like I was not a little kid again, but he made me feel like I was the only person in the office. He would ask me about how's your mother doing. At that time, she was still around. He might have told he told me a story about my grandmother one time. He connected with me. Now, did I know whether Dr. Rayner got an A in pulling teeth? Did I know whether he got an did I know whether he got an A in uh, uh, whatever you want to, whatever they do, bridges or whatever. I have
Right.
no idea. I know he did a he was competent. He didn't hurt me really. And he was just a nice man. And often that's who we want to do business with, people that we like and people that make us feel good. Too many lawyers have forgotten that.
I love that. So much to learn from you, Neil. You're like a wealth of knowledge and education. So tell us like a little bit about your law firm. I mean, we talked about your story, which is tremendous, and how you got there, and now you're an owner of a decent size, a big law firm. I don't know, like you have some associates, you have some people who work for you, you have you have a co-partner.
Well,
Um,
we have we have pivoted over the last several years. We used to have a fairly large office in Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, and uh, a few years back, we moved. We bought a building on Long Island, and we kind of started to pivot, downsized a bit. And now we're in a different mode where, we are special counsel to a number of law firms where, and by the way, we have a great online presence. So even though we still get cases from clients that worked with me 25 years ago, which is unusual to hear anymore, quite frankly. But we do get a fair amount of our cases that way, but we still get a lot of online cases. But we do a lot of counsel, special counsel work where we often are the relationship managers between the client and our of counsel partners who are doing the day-to-day litigation. And you have no idea how important it is to be that person. Most law firms don't have these type of people there, don't have these type of people that manage the relationships, manage expectations of clients. And so that's kind of where we're pivoting. We still handle some of our own work, but we really like to work with other lawyers who think like us, and so that's kind of what we're doing now.
that's awesome. Congrats on and are you still going in, trying cases, doing all that stuff?
I personally am not trying
Okay.
cases, but I still negotiate plenty of settlements, and but I'm doing more and more of this client relationship management, which is a significant thing, in my opinion, in the life cycle. I call it the life cycle of the lawsuit.
That's great. So Neil, tell us how you're mentoring millennials now.
So at some point, I probably a little bit after the book was written. Although the truth is, Benny, when based on the philosophy that I have and we've talking about, I have been mentoring uh, younger lawyers for a long time. So when I had my own firm and we
Man,
had
I
20
wish I would have
people,
met you like 20 years ago.
and we would have gotten in trouble. We
17 years ago, maybe. All right.
I had what, about 20 people work with me, a number of young lawyers working for me. So I've always been mentoring young lawyers.
Yeah.
And so the idea of being able to kind of guide especially lawyers today who find it so difficult to build up a clientele, who think that it's so easy so when they first get into it to get clients, especially in the personal injury field. All they have to do is throw up a website and they're going to get clients. That's not true. All they have to do is go to a bar association meeting and meet, and some lawyers are going to start throwing them the small cases. That's not true either. It's not easy. And
Yeah.
so I try to give young lawyers an opportunity to hear from somebody who has had, 30 plus years experience on the things that I believe matter, and ultimately how to get clients not only to retain you, but how to get them to be raving fans of your law firm. In other words, instead of spending money, tens of thousands of dollars on Google ads, I understand they have their place, but instead of spending that type of money on Google ads, spending less money and investing in your client relationships so that you have raving fans for the next 30 years.
Yeah, that's great advice. Anybody who has you as a mentor is certainly lucky. So tell us what's on the horizon for you. Like, what projects are you working on? Any other books, or like you're gonna have a huge blowout event, or like what are you working on, Neal?
Well, gee, I was just talking to my wife about that. I said, I've got to start paring down all these different ideas in my head. I get just too many. It's like,
That's
you know,
awesome, though. Isn't that a great
I
feeling, though?
mean, it is, but it's, God, how many hours in the day do I have that I could
Yeah.
just start, doing all this stuff? But, that's the type of person I am. So, yeah, I'm thinking, another book possibly. Um,
What
you
about the
know,
movie? Let's get the
yeah.
movie going.
Well, the truth is, without mentioning anything, I have spoken to a few people.
Nice.
It's a very hard thing to do. I don't
Yeah.
envision that it's happening, but I did speak to a couple of people about it. But
Okay.
more importantly, I now have my own consulting website for millennial lawyers, and so that kind of is on its own way. I have an 8 module course that just dropped recently
Wow.
for millennial lawyers if they want to get an idea of a deeper idea of the way I think and the way I think that lawyers, young lawyers can get clients not only to sign on the retainer agreement, but to become raving fans of theirs, to become clients for life, to get better settlements because you know the client better than anybody. That's when you get the better settlements, the better trial verdicts, when you got a personal stake in it, not just because you got a fee as part of the case, but also because you have a relationship as part of the case. And so all of that is 2024. We have the possibility of a podcast maybe coming up. I'm really not sure.
Okay.
A book that I will tell you offline what the name of the book might be,
Nice.
or the podcast might be,
Okay.
and you'll give me your opinions.
All
And
right.
uh, and an event. Well, I guess I'm looking forward to your event.
Yeah. Hey, I'd love to keep having them. I think they've been a lot of fun. So, uh,
Events are really cool, and I'm not just blowing smoke up your,
yeah.
beep beep. The truth is, uh, when I first saw your Instagram account, which I wasn't even aware of, I
Mhm.
said, "This is cool. This is a guy that is taking a little bit of a chance here, and he's doing something different. It's not the same old, same old. You're
Right.
really getting people to step out of their comfort zone a little bit and get a little uncomfortable. And I think that's really good. And I think that's what makes it a bit different. And that's what you need to do.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we're going to continue doing it Uh,
Yeah.
but Neil, did we leave anything out today? Is there anything else you wanted to touch upon? I think, we
If
covered a
if
lot.
any if anybody is interested in visiting a website, uh, my module, people can get an idea of it at learn.truthinsuccess.com. That's learn.truthinsuccess.com. And even before you look at that, because quite honestly, I don't think it's for everybody. It's only for certain people that I think had that philosophy. So I wouldn't want anybody to waste money without at least talking to me first. So just, DM me on Instagram at Neal A. Goldstein, NealAGoldstin, Neal A. Goldstein, and we'll set up, a meeting or something online, 15, 20 minutes, a half hour. We'll just talk and we'll see if it's something that would work for you or not. It's okay.
That's great, Neal. Neal Goldstein, thank you so much. Tremendous story. Who's in the Waiting Room?
Thank you.
Great
Thank
book.
you.
You got to read it. Create the life you want through the power of authentic relationships. That's what it's all about. Share your story, everyone. And everybody out there, thanks for tuning in. Wherever you are in the world today, enjoy yourselves.